Mr. Koretz, would you like to, are you ready? I would now like to turn the floor over to Mr. Paul Koretz for a very important presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. And thank you for joining me in Women Against Gun Violence this morning to declare today as Women Against Gun Violence Talk Day in Los Angeles. I've worked with Women Against Gun Violence for the past 20 years. Their work is vital, and they've been a great partner through the years, helping Los Angeles come closer to ending the epidemic that is gun violence. I'd also like to recognize Ann Rice Lane, the founder of Women Against Gun Violence, and Margot Bennett, the executive director. And I want to start my remarks this morning with a question. Can the simple act of locking up guns save lives? Of course, the answer is yes, it can. 60% of gun-related deaths among children and teens occur in their home or in the home of a friend or family member. That's 12,000 young lives that could potentially be saved or protected from injury each year if adults locked up their guns and stored them away securely. 68% of school shootings involve a gun brought from home. Think about it. There have been over 80 school shootings since Newtown, Connecticut, that have killed or injured over 100 young students. Women Against Gun Violence and the Talk Project address this simple solution by teaching parents and caregivers how to talk with their neighbors, family, and friends about guns and safe gun storage in a way that is non-adversarial and not political. And also by providing free gun locks like these to those who participate in the Talk Project 1-hour parent workshops. Today we want to stand together and promote the Talk program and Talk Day here in Los Angeles. And now I'd like to ask Councilmember Paul Kerkorian to say a few words.
Thank you, Mr. Koretz. Thank you for bringing Women Against Gun Violence with us again today, and thank you for your decades of leadership on reducing gun violence, Mr. Koretz. 20 years ago, Ann Rice Lane, who's with us here today, and then Councilmember Jackie Goldberg asked me to participate as one of the founding advisory board members of Women Against Gun Violence, and I was, of course, honored to do so. And in the ensuing 20 years, I've had a chance to work closely with Women Against Gun Violence, as well as a number of council members and through my work in the legislature on measures to reduce the plague of gun violence in this city and in this state. And every single measure that has been proposed to try to reduce the access to guns has been opposed by the National Rifle Association with the same argument. It punishes responsible gun owners. Don't do that because it's an inconvenience to responsible gun owners. Well, what the Talk program does is it helps to make gun owners more responsible, and it helps to make people who come into contact with those gun owners safer by making those gun owners more responsible. So this is a vitally important program. We know that there are millions of guns in the homes of Angelenos. Millions of guns in the homes of Angelenos. And we know that when our children go to play at a neighbor's house, there's a fairly good chance that there's a gun in that home. So the Talk program helps us as parents. It helps empower us to be able to keep our kids safer. It helps empower us to be able to address the challenges that we have with so many of those guns being unsecured in our own neighborhoods. So the Talk program is a huge step forward. I hope that responsible gun owners will embrace this effort. I hope that the advocates on the other side of this issue will embrace and support and encourage this effort because this goes to exactly the point that they've always raised in opposition to the responsible things that we've tried to do. I also want to note that today I'm introducing a motion, and I'm pleased to have Mr. Koretz and Mr. Blumenfield and many of Mr. Parks and others around the horseshoe seconding this motion to require that when guns are not in the possession of the gun owner, that they must be locked and secured in a safe fashion. California law already requires that trigger locks be provided with firearms when they're purchased, but there's no requirement that they actually be used to secure the gun. So we need to have an ordinance in this city to require gun owners to lock up their guns. Because I've got news for you. If you have a gun in your home and you do not secure it and lock it when it is not in your possession, you are not being a responsible gun owner. So this measure is going to try to bring additional accountability and additional safety to our neighborhoods. So, Mr. Koretz, thank you. Women Against Gun Violence, thank you for all of the work that you do day in, day out to make our city a safer place.
Thank you, Mr. Kerkorian, for all your years of leadership on this issue as well. In fact, we both met working on this issue many years ago. And now I'd like to ask Councilmember Bob Blumenfield to speak.
Thank you very much. I want to thank Councilmember Koretz for bringing this forward, and both Councilmember Pauls for their outstanding leadership on this issue. It's an issue I certainly care deeply about as well. Really want to praise Women Against Gun Violence for spearheading the TALK project. And, you know, that's what it's about. That's why we're wearing these pins. Ask me about TALK, because it's about communicating. It's about talking about gun violence, because it's about educating people. Because, as my colleagues have noted, even if you don't have a gun in your house, if you have small children and they go on a play date, there's a gun in the house where they're having a play date. You know, and this frightens me as a parent of young kids, a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, to have to think about that fact that when we send them off on an innocent play date, for all we know, there could be a gun that's not secured, and we all know the tragic consequences that can come from that. So it's really important that we're here. Gun violence is one of those issues that is avoidable. It's 100% avoidable. We just need to take steps, be educated, communicate, and actually use trigger locks and other devices to secure guns and to make gun owners responsible gun owners. So it's an important conversation that we all have to have. I've had it with my family and my kids to be super alert for when they do see a gun to stay away. It's important that we talk, and organizations like Women Against Gun Violence are really doing the yeoman's work and making it happen. So I want to join my colleagues in praising them and thanking them for the good work that you continue to do. Thank you.
Now I have the pleasure of introducing Lori Safian, who serves as the board chair of Women Against Gun Violence. And we thank you, Lori, for all your hard work on behalf of the organization.
Thank you. Happy Talk Day, LA. Thank you, City Council, for this wonderful recognition, and a particular thank you to Councilmember Kerkorian and Koretz for your longtime vision and leadership on this issue, and for partnering with us for many years to keep our communities, our families, and our children safe. You have been tremendous leaders on this issue, and we have much gratitude for working with us. I want to acknowledge the people who are standing here with me today, our board members, our members of our Speakers Bureau, including our Women Against Gun Violence founder, Ann Rice Lane, who more than 20 years ago recognized that gun violence was an epidemic in our communities that urgently needed addressing. I also want to acknowledge the members of our Speakers Bureau, many of whom are gun violence survivors, who selflessly go into communities and share their personal stories so that the public can understand the real-life consequences of gun violence. They are the inspiration and the motivation for the work that we do, and they are incredible people, and we have much thanks to them. Now you're going to hear from Holly Dexter, who's going to share her personal story and talk with you about why the TALK project is of such great importance to her.
Thank you so much. I work with Women Against Gun Violence. I'm on their Speakers Bureau, and I'm so proud to be here today representing the TALK project, which is especially important to me because of my own personal experience with gun violence. I might get emotional, I always do. My little brother Christopher was just 7 years old when he was shot in the head. It was a summer morning and he was out riding his bike when a neighborhood kid said, come into my house, I want to show you something really cool. That something really cool was his father's loaded rifle. He aimed it at my brother's head and pulled the trigger. Christopher was in the first grade. He was a little kid missing his front teeth. I am the one who held him in my arms as my mother drove to the ER, running through stoplights all the way as he was bleeding. I was 14 years old. My brother survived, but with traumatic brain injury. The life that was meant for him was taken with a single bullet. With brain surgeries and a year of physical therapy, Christopher learned how to use a fork and walk without limping. He learned to talk without slurring. He learned how to write with his left hand to compensate for the loss of motor skills on his right. He wore a helmet to school to stop the bullet still lodged in his brain from shifting. With heavy daily medication, the seizures and nosebleeds eventually slowed, and his young body was able to heal some of the physical damage, but not the emotional damage. Often we hear of shootings where the victim has survived, and we consider that a happy ending. But there are no happy endings for victims of gun violence or for their families or their communities. Those that do survive live with pain, injury, and perhaps even paralysis, and all of them live with the emotional paralysis of post-traumatic stress disorder. I often wonder what my brother's life would be like today if that bullet had never been fired. But that's all I'll ever be able to do, is to wonder. But you have the opportunity to prevent this from happening to your child and to your neighbor's children. We had no idea that our neighbors kept a loaded gun in their home. It never occurred to us to ask. But you can, and I urge you to. The Talk Project helps parents to talk with their children about guns, and more importantly, to talk with their friends and neighbors about safe gun storage. We also offer parent workshops and distribute life-saving information to over 500,000 Southern California elementary school families. I am so grateful to Women Against Gun Violence for giving me the chance to turn my tragedy into an opportunity to save lives. Thank you.
And I'm not sure it was planned necessarily, but I'd like to ask the founder of the organization, Ann Rice Lane, to say a few words if she might, as long as we have her here.
Thank you, Paul. I'm very pleased to be here. I think hearing Holly's story and knowing how moving it truly is all we really wanted to have happen today. Because we think if you know the stories of unintended shootings, you can't but help us with this talk program to help people really talk to their kids about guns. And since Paul Koretz stuck me with this job of speaking extemporaneously to you, I'm going to say something extemporaneously. The very first person that I ever met who even talked to me about the possibility of forming an organization was a then member of the West Hollywood City Council, I think you were a member, who had begun long before I did to deal with the issue of gun violence, and that was Paul Koretz. So he is our inspiration from the very beginning, and Paul Kerkorian, once we got started, joined us. So we're very proud to have two members of the City Council, and Bernard Parks is a member of our advisory board as well, and the council has been very supportive, and we're very grateful. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. And also, I think we were originally asking Neri Martinez to say a few words as well, as someone who's been part of this effort. So I don't know if you want to come up here and join us or from your seat. But
you could speak from the seat either way, whatever you like.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you so much for bringing Women Against Gun Violence here today, this morning. You know, as a mother of a 5-year-old, I can tell you that this is part of what moms at my daughter's school talk about often. You know, this is the time where our kids are starting to ask, can we have sleepovers? Can they come over for play dates and so on? One of the most important things that we, not only, of course, finding out who the parents are and who the friends are and so on, is asking, is there a gun in the home? Do you have it locked up? Is there a conversation about gun safety at home? That's something that we can do as parents. We model for our children every single day, and it's our responsibility to ensure that our children not only have a safe environment at home, but when they go play with their friends, that we do the same thing and have that conversation with the parents of the homes that our kids are playing at. So I thank you for your leadership, and this is absolutely something that we can prevent by talking with other parents about and ensuring that our kids are as safe as they can possibly be. It's our responsibility. Thank you so much for being here.
Mr. President, I don't know if there are speakers around
I'd like
the horseshoe.
I'd like to call on Mr. Englander.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I want to thank you for having the courage to share your stories. And I particularly really want to thank not only the great women that are and started this and continue this conversation and dialogue. And I'm not going to get into my personal story, but I too am a victim of gun violence in my family. But I want to thank my colleagues because they have the power of the bully pulpit, and they've got the ability to affect good legislation, to listen, to take the time. And it's not just bringing you here and what you do every day to go out in the schools with your organization and your friends and your network, but getting an ear to those who can make a difference are 3 wonderful leaders right in front of you that are doing just that. In fact, all 3 have dedicated much of their political career, their government career, to ensuring more safety with guns. And I can go into a long laundry list of each one with Bob and Paul and what they've done and what they continue to do. And so I want to thank them for working with you and all of you, what you're doing day in and day out to spread the word. And it's about talking and conversation and making sure that these preventable incidents do not occur. And we won't even get into the other ones, but just that alone is horrific. And I want to applaud all of you for standing together. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Labange.
You know, if you look at the world, it is all about women. If you really look at it, if you look at who saved things or who started things, it's all about women. I forget her name, but she saved the cable cars up in San Francisco. Forgive me for not remembering that. I think of my own high school. It's 4 women who stood up and said, don't build a new school, save historic Marshall High. But I look at you all and Ms. Saffron and your mother and all the work that she's done in all sorts of ways. Ann Rice Lane, a commissioner for Mayor Bradley. You know, you could go to the beach or you could go to the mountains, you go to the desert, but you came back, as always, to be the voice of sanity, which is so sad. And the issue that you spoke of about your neighbor and your son, how tragic. So to prevent everything, and one person is very important. All people are important, but one person makes a difference. So whatever the drum that you're beating, that people hear it, to talk is an important drum. So I just wanted to stand here. And I always like to talk about Ann Rice Lane, because when I talk about her, I talk about Tom Bradley, and it goes to the greatness of a period of time here in our city. Thank you. And Mr. Koretz, or is it Cortinas, or what was it this morning? What they call you out on Wilshire Boulevard? They made a mistake on Paul's name, which is an inside joke there. But the fact that Paul Koretz has always been beating the drum too, from Hamilton High School all the way through UCLA to being volunteer in a variety of campaigns. You're a great leader in that, Paul. Thank you. And tonight, you'll be honored at Melrose and La Brea, so that's a good thing. Congratulations, Women Against Gun Violence. Thank you very much.
Again, congratulations for all your hard work and all that you do. And again, thank you, Mr. Kerkorian, Mr. Blumenfield, and Mr. Koretz.
And we'd like to present this certificate on behalf of the City of Los Angeles for Talk Day LA.